Hey guys, welcome to episode 11 of the Full Quadrant Podcast. Your hosts Jason and Michael here for you. Mike, how's it going?
It's going good, except for the
Good.
heat. It's very hot right now, so
Yeah.
it's very difficult. Have to do a little bit of training in the morning. But I did put that mini split in my garage where I train,
Oh, nice.
so the garage
That
is
works
nice
out.
and cool now.
Very nice.
Yeah. I used to have a floor unit, but it wasn't enough.
Yeah. Yeah, it's brutal. Brutal heat. And I mean, we're hot here too. We're in the upper 90s. So anyways, awesome. It's been a week and a half or so since we had our last podcast. And we just wanted to keep these rolling. Like we said, we've got slow but steady support, and we appreciate everybody for following, subscribing, liking, sharing the podcast, commenting even. So excited to have another conversation.
You shot me a message saying what should we talk about, and I just said puppies,
Yeah,
and
you got puppy
it's
fever or something going on right now, Mike?
I think always. Always have. I like puppies because they don't know anything, right? So there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing really you don't have to change anything. You're just adding stuff,
They haven't been
and
corrupted yet.
yep, and they're like always if you do it right, they're always like right there, like, hey, let's do something, you know.
Right. Yeah.
But the thing is, puppies is such a broad topic. There's so much you could talk about.
Oh man,
It's
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 such
it's
a
a
big
lot.
one. Yeah. Yeah.
So um, when we spoke on the phone, to see what we're going to talk about, um, my thought was to just start with, the things you do when you get the puppy. When you first get the puppy, what you have to do to set it up for success and for whatever you want for it to be in the future. You know, from a working dog to a pet dog to like a service dog, whatever it's going to be, right?
Sure.
So it's not a cookie cutter approach, or it shouldn't be, where you do the same thing with every dog. You have to pick what you're going to do according to that dog, right? And according to the job it's going to have, even if it's a pet. There's things you should emphasize when you first get the puppy in, so that you are setting that dog up for success. So there will be limited number of problems later that you have to work on. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, you haven't had a puppy for a while. I haven't had a puppy for a while.
So
Have you
do we
trained
even
any
do we even
puppies?
have a leg to stand on talking about this?
Well, I've trained a puppy recently, not my own, but how about in your club? Did you have any young dogs? Anybody have a
Yeah.
young
I
dog?
see. We see young dogs quite frequently. Like you said, I haven't personally had a dog that was a puppy since 2018. My most recent dog that I got I got him when he was older. He was about 11, 12 months old when I got my last dog. So yeah, so it's been a hot minute since I've had a puppy, but definitely see a lot of puppies. They come into our training program. We've got a lot of puppies in club that we work with. So
So you're always exposed to puppies in one way or
yeah,
another.
yeah. Actually, one of my club members, her dog she had bred just had a litter of puppies. No, 6 or 7 females, all females, a full female litter.
All females.
So
Wow.
yeah, what are the
So do
chances?
they get like a lot of times, people have a list of people that want a dog, right? A breeder has a list of people that want a dog.
Yeah.
What happens when like those people wanted a male and now they're all females? Does she?
So I know I mean, a lot of breeders are out there, and everyone is going to have their own style on how they do this. But the ones I know and that I'm familiar with and close to, a lot of them won't take deposits until the litter is down. They'll put you on a list for like, they'll have like a deposit list where when you commit to saying, hey, I want to put down a deposit, they'll say, okay, you're number 3 on the list, right? And then based on that list, when the litter is born, they make the announcement. And then if you're still interested in depositing, you would get your deposit in the order that you reached out to the breeder. That's how I know some breeders do it. Others, they're pretty confident that they're going to get what they're going to get, and they start taking deposits right away, and they do it that way as well. So I mean, there's everything in between too, like,
Yeah. When I got my con, we had already put the deposit down, but because he had so many litters, but we wanted from a specific sire, right? We wanted a puppy. We didn't care about the mother, right? We just want the father to be from Spider was the name of the father.
Yeah.
So
Right.
we were just waiting, and all of a sudden we got a message saying, "Hey, we have a litter. Like, what do you want?" And we told them, like, we want a male brindle from Spider, and they chose for us, and just we got him. Nice dog.
Yeah.
Nice dog. Not for everybody. Definitely not.
Right. In recent news today, the release of online silver school for the NePoPo program, that's available. I'm interested to hear your take on your approach to a puppy, training puppies, raising a puppy through NePoPo, and like what are some things that you would kind of point out there?
So I do start. Well, first of all, I start with, for my puppies, I start with letting them pretty much do whatever they want. Right? I don't want any like restrictions on them in the beginning. So I want them to be as free and as like to express themselves powerfully, right? To go like whatever they're going to do, just do it all in, And now a little bit more than I used to is I watch and just kind of watch them and see like what their tendencies are, because every dog is different, see what they react to, how do they recover, what they like to do. Are they more of a dog that's using their nose all the time, right, as opposed to just looking around? The one thing I noticed, because I had the thing with my 2 last dogs was I had them both at the same time. They were 3 months apart, which I don't recommend. Don't get 2 puppies at the same time. But they were 3 months apart, and I could see the differences, right? And as they grew, I would see how they would react. And for example, Ripley, and she's a Doberman, if she heard a noise, she would stop and bark towards that noise and be like, "What is that?" Right? Khan, the Dutchie, if he heard a noise, he would run towards it barking immediately. Like he was going for it to find out what it's at. He's not waiting to see what it is. He's going to go find out. So he would, like, all his energy would go forward, you know, whereas Ripley would like be reserved and cautious. So, and looking at that was, how you have to change how you train the dogs. But anyway, going back to like puppies, and I had a lot of videos of this, was I always start with uh, free shaping the puppies, because I want them to just start from a young age trying to think and figure things out. Okay. And when I'm doing the free shaping, it's just in the beginning, I'm changing what it is constantly. And it's about them thinking and trying to problem solve rather than learning something, right? And if you and what I'll do is I'll give them an object and maybe 1-2 reps that once they engage with it, I will change that object. In the beginning, it's almost I'm not looking for a finished behavior. I don't want them to necessarily always, like, say, stick their nose in this cone, right? I want interaction first, and maybe the first thing they do, maybe they go close to it and sniff it. I might stop right there and come back later to it, right? But I might do the same things over and over to get to a certain behavior, but I'm not doing it in one session with one item when they're young, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, you were talking about some of the downfalls of that, or sorry, not that free shaping, but the luring that is common on social media and amongst, pet and sport people that you see in Home Depot or Lowe's, these stores, and I maybe share some of those observations because I thought those were really interesting.
Yeah, one thing I learned by doing, right? Everything's trial and error. Unless you have somebody to tell you every little thing, which usually you can. You have to learn things on your own, right? But I, like my older dog, I took him to Home Depot to expose him to, the environment. But I would do free shaping in Home Depot, okay? Like free shaping him onto the carts, up the stairs, onto shelves, right? Things like that, interacting with things. But I think there's a problem with that, okay? And what it is that later on, when they get older, now that environment has become a free shaping environment. And when you go in there, they will start offering those behaviors without you asking for them, right? Because they were rewarded for those things when they were puppies. They look at the environment and context, right? And they go, oh, okay, we're free shaping because this is what I remember. And they start getting onto carts, and then they're free shaping because they'll get on and look at you like, hey, is this the right thing? And they start offering behaviors that they did when they were puppies. And like we were talking about, that is one thing that we learned from Bart and Michael was the mother language, right? And I didn't understand how important that was before that. And the thing with the mother language is that whatever you teach your dog first, especially as a puppy, that's going to be one of the strongest things they remember. Yeah. So what I learned from Bart and Michael was that if you want your dog to be a detection dog, right? If it's going to be using its nose, that is the first thing you should start teaching.
Right.
Right. If you're going to do bite work, you should start with holding and using their mouth. So whatever you're going to teach, whatever discipline, sport, working, whatever it is, that's what you should start when they're puppies. If the dog's going to be working when it gets older.
And as the activity is age appropriate, obviously you're not going to throw a puppy on a seat, at 8 weeks.
Well,
but like age appropriate training.
People do that.
Some people do it, but it's not that just because they do it doesn't mean it should.
Yeah.
Right. And actually, that's a really good. I like that point, and because one thing I've done with my dogs is, and this was back, so when I got my puppy, I knew he was going to be an excellent dog for protection. He had the possessive nature of the toy or the rag in the puppy play area. And I have my assessment that I do on puppies to determine if it's a dog that I want. But for me, one way to use this to your advantage, and that I've done, is I knew I had a good, so my Malinois, I knew he was going to be good in protection. So I started him doing obedience and tracking first, because those were his weaker phases, right? Naturally, genetically, he was going to bring about good protection. And so because I didn't want to double down in one out of it, in Schutzen, there's three phases: one, tracking, obedience, protection. And instead of doubling down on the protection where he's already going to be naturally excelling, I played the statistical advantage and said, okay, I'm going to, spread out the odds of me doing better, and then focus on teaching him his mother language, being obedience and nose work in the beginning. Like, that's from day one. Like, we were doing shaping in the cone, obedience, box work, position boxes, things like that. And I was really glad with that decision, because again, had I have done just straight protection, rag work, all that stuff, I'd have had a phenomenal dog, maybe even too much of a dog. But then I always wonder what would have happened had I not have done the foundation in obedience and scent work that I did with that dog.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, you're going for a sport that has
Right.
3 phases.
Right.
So that was the thing. All 3 phases should be the mother language, because you're going to need them all together.
Equally. Yeah, equally. They're
Right?
all rated at 100 points.
Yeah. That's another thing. Like, what I do with my puppies is I have them find their food from puppies, because I want them. That's the first way I teach them to use their nose.
Sure. Yep.
Searching for their meal, right, in the backyard,
Mm-hmm.
Which quickly, like, you run out of things to do if you have a small yard, because their nose gets better and better, and it's like, in the beginning they're actually searching to find it, but as they get better and better and their nose improves and they learn how to pinpoint things, it's like as soon as they come out of the house, it's like they know where it's at, which way to go. The scent,
Yeah,
they're
for
picking up
sure.
the scent right away.
Yeah, it's hard to fool them when you've done that much with them. And I mean, speaking of puppies, it's just so interesting. Like, I like the point that you made, is like, sometimes we create our own problems and we don't know it. So for example, in pet training, a lot of times, another common complaint from owners is that, oh, I want them to stop jumping on people. But the first thing that happens with that dog that is jumping on people as an adult or a younger dog is, when they got home, the dog got so much value and reinforcement from being all up in your grill. Like, everyone loves on them, and like, you want your dog to be social and friendly, so everyone's like picking and cuddling and coddling your dog. But that carries through into the dog's later age, and so the dog's like, hey, I see someone, I want to experience this same connection with that person, so I'm trying to jump on you. And that's where the jumping, a lot of times stems from, that these pet owners are dealing with.
Yeah, and it's not only that the dog wants to be up there, but what happens is, when they're puppies, they put their front legs on your legs, and then you end up picking them up.
Right.
Right. So they were reinforced for jumping on you.
Or this is the other way that dogs learn to jump onto us, is they put their legs on someone who doesn't want them on them, and guess what? We push them off, and then we initiate opposition reflex, and the dog wants to come back harder, right?
Yeah.
So like,
Especially the pushy dogs.
Yeah, yeah. And so one thing I do, and I've done this walking into clients' homes before. They've got like a big mastiff who's friendly, and I wouldn't do this with a reactive or a unstable dog. I absolutely wouldn't do this with that dog, because this is not that would be a risky maneuver. But on dogs that are known to be stable and safe and welcoming and friendly, but they don't have manners or boundaries, one way you can get the dog to stop jumping on you is, when he jumps on you, just give him a big old bear hug, make it weird, and just wait for the dog to start pushing to try to get away from you. And then when they're really pushing hard, that's when you let them break free, and they realize you use opposition reflex against them, to move them in the opposite direction away from you. And so like all it takes is like dog comes up to you once, he jumps on you, you grab him, hold him, make it weird. He wants to get away, he pushes, you let him break free. He does it again, do it again, bear hug, he gets weird, he wants to break away. Third time, he thinks twice about coming up, and he's just happy to sit there and stare at you and just like wait for you to pet him on the head or something like that.
Does that translate to other people, or is it just it's just you and he won't jump up on you anymore?
I've seen it both ways, but it's a quick fix. You know, you just like you stage it with people that are willing to go through that process, and you do it on a few different people, and pretty soon the dog's like, everyone I jump on inevitably holds me until I get uncomfortable. So I'm going to stop doing that. And again, you're utilizing the dog's own intrinsic desire, creating the active dog to do what you want him to do. And then when he gets away, he's rewarded. It's NePo training on the dog, right? Negative reinforcement. You know, he breaks away from that uncomfortable stimulus of being held by someone who's bear hugging him.
But then you get the dog that actually wanted that.
Yes. So, but there,
Which is what,
but
yeah, go
you
ahead.
just have to go, you just have to go longer. You just have to be willing to wait it out, because there's always a point. I've never come across a dog who has outlasted my desire to make it weird. Like, you know, just by giving them like a strong bear hug, right? You know,
Nice.
just a
But that
matter of
goes,
will.
yeah. And like talking about dogs that like that though, or that like some of it, but you make it weird. You make it weird. Because we were talking about the labs, like earlier, we were talking about the labs I had, where they were all from the same litter, but we needed to, their environmental exposure had to be different for all three of them. And it was because of what they found reinforcing in the environment. You know, from the one that was wanted to go greet every single person to the second one being kind of neutral. It was like, people are good, but I like you also.
Sure.
And to the third one that was wary of people and didn't really want to greet that many people, wanted to stay close to you. Right. So that's why, like we said, like it shouldn't be cookie cutter. It should be whatever that particular dog is in need of at that time. You know, so if you go out and just start letting all these people pet the dogs, the one that likes people is, you're going to have a problem later in getting engagement because they've been reinforced so much by strangers that that's all they look for is strangers, right? Instead of looking at you. And then the opposite for the one that is not that comfortable with strangers, you know. So it just comes down to balance, you know. But going back to the puppies in the beginning, it's about making them strong, as strong as possible. The free shaping that causes them to think and problem solve, but then making things difficult so that they have to overcome obstacles. And when they do overcome those obstacles, you know, there's confidence because they did it, you know.
For you, what is a scenario in which you don't or wouldn't take that approach?
The approach for making them stronger.
Yeah, because there are some scenarios where that's not the right solution or the right prescribed pathway of training a certain
Yeah.
dog, right?
So I'll give you an example with my Dutchie. Because he's already strong, relatively, he was already strong as a puppy. I didn't do a lot of free shaping past teaching him what it meant and how to problem solve. Because that's one thing with free shaping. It makes a dog stronger also. We talk about the dopamine box strengthening a dog, but free shaping really makes a dog stronger because you make them feel like they control everything. Now, if you have a strong dog already, you don't want them thinking they can control everything, right? Because then they start challenging, like you, if you don't let them do what they want. So with him, I stopped pretty early with the free shaping, and I went to more like showing him what I wanted him to do, just for that reason. Whereas Ripley was weaker. Yeah, she's Doberman too. So with her, it was more free shaping, and now she'll go, like, depending on the context, she starts offering behaviors when she believes there's a possibility of a reward, right? She starts
Yeah.
looking around. What can I do to get you to activate you, the handler, to get me the reward, right? So with her, I actually probably need to do more, even more than I did. I should have done, just to really, really, really open her up.
Yeah, it's all about knowing the dog, and that's the thing that's hard about puppies is sometimes what you need to do with the dog is counterintuitive because of the dog's nature and your goals for the dog, right? So like you have to be able to read the dog correctly so that you can give them the right program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can't just be on like auto drive and just, okay, we're going to do this. Now we're going to do that. And now we're going to free shape. And now we're going to do, whatever. We're going to teach the heel. We're going to teach whatever you're going to teach. It's going and developing the plan for each individual dog. And, because you're going to get what you start with,
Yeah.
you know, especially with the, I would say, the NePoPo style of puppy raising, where you're trying to maximize everything, right? But like you said, with sometimes you don't want to do that. Even with like pet dogs, you might not want to make them very, very good at problem solving, because then they're always looking at everything as a problem to solve. And the
Right.
problem is, those really good dogs, they'll they'll pick up things quickly. I think that's what happens when they learn how to problem solve, is they will pick up things in the environment quickly, and they will learn like after one rep or two. So you, like, with pet dogs, you don't want them becoming too strong in that, especially with somebody who doesn't know how to, to pay attention to that and notice what's going on, right?
Right.
Or maybe you should, because then they have to come looking for you for help with training later to get them under control.
Possibly. Um, I actually saw a comment uh in a forum, and you see these, they cycle, they appear every couple months or so. Someone was asking, how early do people put an e-collar on their puppies? Like what are they doing in puppy training, and how soon are they putting e-collars on their dogs? And this was in a NePoPo forum, and I was really interested, is one way to describe it. I was a little surprised by the feedback I saw to that question. Not saying it was bad feedback, but it was not what I expected from a community of people that have gone through the school or are familiar with the school in some way, shape, or form. Maybe they've attended a seminar or done an online school. And I'll pose the question to you: when are you introducing the e-collar to your dog?
Well, as soon as it fits, you should do it as soon as possible, especially with like Martin Systems that has, like, level one is so low, right? You are you can introduce it from the beginning, and because you are familiar with motivating your dog and keeping that motivation high, right? Because you don't want any kind of pressure you add, be it from e-collar to flat collar, pinch collar, whatever it is, slip lead. You don't want that being higher, the pressure being higher than the motivation that the dog has, right? But at the same time, the e-collars, especially in Martin systems, is so precise, right? It's such a range where it's not something that's very, like level one is not very high pressure, especially when you can add more contact points, right? You can make it very weak to where it's a sensation. And the problem is the people that ask that question, that tells you that they are using the e-collar at a higher level than they should be,
Right.
right? When they start using
Because
it. And that's
they're
when you hear,
concerned
oh,
about what it'll do to a puppy.
yes.
Yeah.
But if you have it on the lowest level where the puppy just barely feels it, what does it matter how old the puppy is, right?
Exactly.
Because there's different levels. There's sensation, there's nagging, then it starts becoming uncomfortable, then it becomes very uncomfortable, right?
Right.
And that's the beauty of the modern e-collars is that you have increments and you can go so low. And especially with Martin systems where you can change level 2 if you want, right? Level 3, you can change all the levels. And I think Martin Michael showed
Right.
that with their horse way back when, because they had changed the horses are so sensitive that they had changed their first 7 levels, because our out of the factory the levels jumped, say like 1 to 25 to 50, it kind of jumps, right, levels. But they had changed it to go for level 1 was 1, level 2 was 2, level 3 was 3. It was a very gradual ramping up of the stim, because the horse, that's what it needed. You can do the same thing with a puppy, right? Is you can have it so
Yep.
it's very mild and doesn't cause any kind of avoidance, right? Of the dog's going like, what is this? It's more of a
Yeah.
inquisitive, like, what is that? Like, what am I supposed to do with that?
Yeah. So it's interesting, and I agree with you. As soon as I can fit it on my dog, it goes on my dog, because like you said, the technology today is such that you don't have to worry about it being it if you worry about it being a bad experience to your puppy, then absolutely, like, you have no business using the tool. But introducing the equipment and the benefits of just the clarity of what's good, what's not good, and showing the dog how to overcome like mild sensation, which is not at all, it's barely perceptible. It's not even in the realm of it's not even in the realm of registering to the dog. It's like a mosquito on your neck, you know. um and so I was really shocked to see a lot of the responses saying, "Oh, you shouldn't be putting a collar on your dog's neck. You should just spend most of your time free shaping the dog, charging the clicker," which are appropriate exercises to be doing, but to discount the value you can immediately have from the get-go. I mean, I was kind of like, whoa, like that's surprising to me, to hear that from this community, because we know better, and
Yeah. But there's the other thing that people, I think they don't think about, right? Is that the precision of the e-collar, right? The precision of the stopping the stem or adding the stem at certain moments, you can't get with any other tool, right? It's almost instant. So, like if you're teaching your dog to go on to like to be on a place, or put their feet on something, you can at the lowest level where it's just sensation have it and then turn it off when the dog is on there, and they will start noticing that difference. But
100%.
then also because when we add the stim to be something rewarding to the dog, which is why in the beginning we classically condition it for food, right? Is that the turning off of that stim is not something the dog wants to do because it's uncomfortable. It's something they want to do because it leads to a reward, right? And that's the point.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. So if you're out there and you're wondering, how old should my dog be before he gets a e-collar? First, go to silver school, do online silver school, or go in person, and then come to Michael and myself for gold school, and we'll teach you everything you need to know so that you don't have to wait to get the benefits of the e-collar on your dog.
Yeah. But let's qualify that, because like everything you said, yes, but the equipment matters. It's not just any e-collar,
Yeah, we're not
because a
talking
lot of
about
the
anything but a Martin system.
yeah, because a lot of the e-collars on the market, the level one, the lowest level is too high for a puppy,
Yeah,
right?
I mean that should go
And
without
it's
saying. That should be like that goes without saying, Mike, because both you and I are Martin System distribution channels. But like I in my Schutzen Club, I've got someone who uses e-collar technologies. I have another. I think it's a dog truck, and without fail, at least once a month, there's e-collar connectivity issues. There's stim issues. There's unreliable levels of stim. Sometimes the 20 is too hot for the dog. Sometimes it's barely felt on the dog. And I never run into those problems with my Martin System 3, my microbe 3B or the chameleon collar. I've never run into those issues whatsoever. So yeah, it goes without saying that you should be using the Martin System equipment. And I mean, why invest in a dog if you're not going to invest in equipment that is equally as valuable as your dog, right? And in fact, in comparison to the money you'll spend on your dog over its lifetime, a nice e-collar is a fraction of the cost to keep it safe, to keep it out of harm's way, to train it well, right? To give you the ability to give it freedom that you want it to enjoy in its life.
yeah, and that's like whenever you hear questions like that, you in the back of your mind, you're like, oh, I know the way this person trains. I can tell because of the question they asked, right? So
Yeah.
that's the thing. Going back to that is like, when do you do it? You can do it right away, depending on how you're using it. Um, but we learn in school. I mean, there's different ways to use an e-collar. So you can introduce it from the beginning, or you can also teach everything first and then add it later,
Right.
which is useful with when you get dogs from other people that have already been trained,
Yeah.
right? You can do that.
Yeah. And for the people out there who might try to like misconstrue what we're saying here, we're not saying every dog needs a e-collar as a puppy, because not every handler knows how to do that. Again, you should be properly educated. So go through the silver program, whether that's online or in person. Come to Michael and I for gold school, and we can definitely set you on a path that's going to leapfrog you above and beyond where you think you would end up with your dog in training in a shorter period of time. I feel like this is a great opportunity right now at this point in this conversation to there was a question that was sent to me and us essentially for discussion on one of our next podcasts that I feel is in line with like like you said, why would you introduce collar or a tool on a younger dog? And so I'm just going to read this question because this has been going around the interwebs. It's been cycling and circling around the interwebs in chat groups and forums and lots of debates about it. So it'll probably make a great conversation topic here. So it says, "Hey Jason, can you please explain more about the must key in the next podcast episode together with Michael Carpenter, specifically the definition and facts, etc. Thank you in advance." This is an individual from Germany, so we actually have a engagement on podcast from Germany. So huge shout out to this individual. Thank you for sending us a comment. Definitely happy to tackle that here. So I'm going to kind of let you kick that off, Mike. What are your thoughts?
That's the saying, opening up a can of worms, right?
Let's do it. That's what we're here for.
Well, the whole thing with NePoPo, okay, is teaching the dog to understand the must key, right? And there's been a lot of debate over that and what it is, okay? Basically, the must key is a positive plus correction that we say in NePoPo. That's basically it, right? And what you're trying to do in NePoPo is to teach them. First, you want to teach the dog what the must key is, what it means, right? Because for the time you're going to have to use it in the future. The thing is with NePoPo, what you're doing is you teach them the must key, and then your training is there to teach them to avoid the must key. Because the must key is the correction that will push the dog into a behavior. And the thing with the must key is it's in the moment. It has to be able to push the dog into the behavior whenever you need it. Right? So what you're doing, you teach the dog what a must key is, which is a correction, basically. And then your training is to teach the dog to avoid the must key and do the behaviors with heart and soul when the cue is given, right?
So can I interject, because I would say things slightly differently. I think you're on the I think I know what you're saying, but in the beginning, it starts out as negative reinforcement, right? It's not a correction. We teach, the correction comes through understanding the pressure to do something, which is negative reinforcement, right? So we introduce pressure.
Let me say real quick, because basically that's what it's. I'm going to say basically again. That's what a plus correction is. Theoretically, is negative reinforcement, because it makes them do the one behavior, right? They can escape it or avoid it by doing that behavior. But yeah, go on. I understand. Yeah, but
right. But
I was talking about the finish thing, and I was talking about the finish thing, and you're talking about from the beginning of training.
Yeah, from the beginning. Yeah, from the introduction of it. So we start with negative reinforcement, and as it's taught in the schools, I think it's important that we stick to the language that is, and the terminology dictated in the school, silver school and gold school. And that goes for both silver students, non-silver students, and gold multiplicators. I think everyone needs to stick to the same terminology and quit trying to conflate terms or to superimpose your own terminology onto something that isn't necessarily described or defined in the school. So again, the pressure of negative reinforcement, we use it and we introduce it in a way that pressure predicts the reward. The dog starts to learn that as soon as it feels pressure, it knows there's the possibility for reward opportunity if it does the right thing. By finding where that pressure is relieved and removed, that's what cues the dog to understand this one behavior where pressure was removed is what unlocks the opportunity for reward. Now, rinse and repeat that many times to where you get the dog where as soon as they feel pressure, they go into action, into specific behaviors, right? Because they know those behaviors get rid of pressure. Now, when the dog decides not to do a cued behavior, then the pressure can follow after the fact, after the disobedience. And now, because it comes after the disobedience, it is now a correction, but the dog understands it. You have prepared the dog for the inevitable correction it is going to receive because it gets distracted by something else. It smells another dog. It sees a car, a kid on a bike, a butterfly, a cheeseburger on the floor when it's supposed to be detecting narcotics. And that's, again, pressure predicts the reward. We're preparing the dog to understand how to deal with the inevitable correction it will receive when it does something down the road it shouldn't do, because there will always come a day where it does something like that, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's the build-up, the teaching, the understanding by the dog that how to turn it off, what it means.
And it has to go that way.
Yep.
It has to go that way because the must component, everyone's confused about what is the must key? What is the must do button, right? That is the pressure that is inescapable from the dog that is introduced. into the situation, and only when the dog complies or acts in a certain way is that pressure relieved. That's why it is a must do button, because the pressure will not go away until that certain thing is completed, right? And a lot of the commentary is about, oh, you can have a negative verbal marker indicating that negative punishment is about to happen, which acts as a must do button. That is not a must do button, because the dog can fake. What if the dog fakes you out? What if you say go to place, and the dog runs to place, and you say and you say or no, and the dog maybe for a second thinks, and then he goes back to place because he stepped over or didn't quite get on top of place, and then he's like, oh, but nothing happens and nothing changes, and he's like, because the pressure is it's not the removal of something that is the must key, it's the presence, it's the presence of that pressure that is the must key. It is the immediate problem the dog is faced with to resolve itself, to find itself more comfortable in its surroundings and in its current situation.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like what you said is perfect. You introduce in the beginning what it means to turn it off, right? And then the reward. Then you introduce how behaviors turn it off, right? And it's always like in the beginning, it's low levels. Then you start going to the point where the dog is making mistakes and they learn, oh, if I don't do this, the pressure will come and I will turn it off by doing the behavior. And you're always working to the point where they avoid that pressure. Okay. But like Bart and Michael say, there's a million pictures you can show your dog, but there's another 5 million that you've never been able to train. And the point, like you brought up the negative punishment marker, right? The thing with that is, can that work? It can work, but it's not a must key, because if you give that marker and the dog doesn't do, now what do? That's the point.
You have no follow-up.
That's where you have the must key that will come and tell the dog you must do this, right?
And if they say or no and the dog doesn't do, guess what they're going to do? They're going to go back to the true must key, which is the pressure, right? So yes. It is not, it's all it is a marker. It's a negative punishment marker that indicates the potential of negative punishment, taking something away. You're losing the opportunity. That is not synonymous. And also, just to remind everybody, it is not the way that the must key is instructed and taught to students in the Silver School by Bart and Michael. And we need to stick to the thing. We need to stick to those definitions.
The NePoPo training, you're trying to get to the point where the dog avoids the must key by doing the behavior every time. But that's it. You must have it available that one time when your dog does not avoid it and decides not to do, and you have to be able to implement it right then to make it happen. Okay,
it's like if you take away the ball for them not doing something, you say and you take the ball away. You can't take the ball away harder to make more sense to the dog. See, right?
Everybody knows, if the dog knows you have a reward, it's different, right? Because in that moment you take it away, they're gonna like, oh, I want my reward, I'm gonna go do the thing.
Yes.
No, this is when you go out your dog wakes you up at 2 a.m., right? You go out to let him go to the bathroom, and there's a friggin' bear in your yard if you live around those places, right? There's no rewards, there's no ball that you took away, there's no food you took away, right? In that case, your dog's never seen a bear before. That's the point. If you have a dog, it's like, if you don't have something to make your dog come back,
your dog
you're screwed, right? You're losing your dog.
Yeah.
Like there was a video online recently where the dog is chasing a bear down the road, and the lady's just calling it and calling it and calling it, and it was just kept going. It was like going after this bear. The bear was like 100 yards away and the dog was running after it. Finally, it stopped when it got far enough away and it came back. But it didn't happen because the person made it happen. They were calling and yelling, whatever. It decided to do it on its own.
Right.
Right. If it had not decided to come, there was nothing you could do unless you had training and you had built that muskie in the dog. Right. And that's the thing that it's, yes, we train the dog to avoid the muskie, but the muskie is there for when the dog sticks up its middle finger and says, I'm not doing it.
Yeah. So two things
No
about
matter.
this is
Go ahead.
two things about this this topic is, again, because there was a lot of conversation saying that positive reinforcement and negative punishment, as intertwined as they are, still has a must key. I disagree. I think we both disagree that it has a must key. And the reason is because when you already remove the opportunity, if you indicate that or no, you're going to lose, I'm going to take away, because the punishment of positive reinforcement is negative punishment, right? That's a question on the test. But I might have to edit that out. But the punishment of positive reinforcement is negative punishment. That means if you cue the dog that says, in my training construct, I'm about to take something away, and you take that thing away to make the dog do, if the dog doesn't do, you can't take it away further. You can't say, oh, I'm going to lock your food up instead of just put it back in the bag. I'm going to lock it up in a container. And now you have to look at it from the dog's perspective. They don't understand. They don't have that rationale. They don't understand fear of missing out, which is why now we go into another conversation, which is why negative aversive does not exist, because the dogs don't have the reasoning ability to say that I can make a choice. Like dogs, we can't say, hey, you've got this choice. You can choose the ball, or you can take it away, or you can do this. Like they're not juggling, they're not making that rationale in their head. They don't have that ability. So the cost benefit analysis it doesn't take place in a dog's mind, because they do not have that FOMO is a one-way street for the dog. They only understand fear of missing out is one thing. They can't say, they're not rating what do I want to lose out on more, right? And back to your comment about the teaching. So escape avoidance training, escape training is negative reinforcement training. You're teaching the dog to get away from it. Punishment, positive punishment, is avoidance training. So you teach in negative reinforcement, you teach them how to escape, and you can't learn to avoid until you've learned to escape. Otherwise, some dogs will get mired in the punishment, and then they experience learned helplessness, and they shut down, and then they experience like a mental meltdown, right? So the positive punishment quadrant is the avoidant quadrant. You're teaching the dog what not to do. Negative reinforcement is the quadrant of escape training. You're teaching the dog how to get away from pressure. That's the delineation. And that's how we need to look at those two quadrants.
Yes. Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. You said that. I was just thinking of something, but you were talking and then I put it back. Oh, yeah. The thing is with that like removing something, like you said. What happens is this: if you remove it, the dog is with a negative, I'm not going to say negative aversive, negative punishment, right?
Right.
What you're teaching the dog is like, make a different decision. Choose another behavior is what you're doing.
It's an open-ended decision for them too. You're allowing them the freedom to make that choice. It's a non-guided it's a non-guided push.
Yeah. It's a choice that in the future they will say, oh, last time that I made this choice, the thing I wanted went away. This time let me choose something else. So that's why it's not aversive in the way that it's not aversive in the meaning of something that's aversive. It's just that didn't work, try something else. Right? And then that didn't work, try something else. That didn't work, try something else. And then they find, oh, this works. I will keep doing that because this works.
And they found that out through trial and error, not through directional.
Yep. But it's
feedback.
also because what do you do at the end of training, right? You put the toy away. You have to put the toy away at some time when you're training. So regular training, you put the toy away. When you're doing negative punishment, you put the toy away. So the first time, right, the dog is in the beginning is not going to understand what that means because it's not aversive to them. They're just like, oh, okay, we're done training. It's going to take a while, and that's the other thing with that. It takes a while for the dog to understand. You have to teach it what it means, right? As opposed to when you use negative reinforcement or positive punishment, the dog knows what it means right away, right? There's
Exactly
immediate action.
So for the people that are out there training positive reinforcement, negative punishment only, right? That's why that's why negative punishment is and cannot be a must key. No matter how powerful it is for the dog, that drive, that hunger, it's still not a must key because in order to build to the point where it is highly motivating, it requires time to pass, right?
Yeah, but I think but the must key has to be able to be used in the moment.
And that's
yes, it. If your
totally.
dog says no to your marker or your cue or anything, your negative punishment marker, if even after the negative punishment marker, your dog says no, you have to be able, that's when you pull out the must key and you make it happen right then. Yeah. That's the point. It's no matter how much you've trained and how good your dog is, that must key is one, to teach them to avoid it. And then two, if they don't want to avoid it and they still take their chance, you have to be able to make it happen right then. And that's the point.
And to be clear, negative punishment is very powerful. It just requires a different timeline than the positive punishment does, right? It can be equally or in some cases more powerful than positive punishment. It just has a different timeline and a different effective nature.
Its effect is in the future.
Yes.
It's not in the moment.
Exactly. Yes.
Full power.
It influences future. It influences future behavior and decisions, whereas positive punishment influences present or in the moment decisions.
Yep, and future.
I mean, and future, but like it's
but it's right then.
Effective nature.
Your dog will stop digging. If your dog is digging and you add positive punishment, your dog will stop digging if it's aversive enough. Right? That's the point. It will stop digging now.
Right.
But if your dog is digging and you go, hey, I'm not going to give you the ball. And it looks at you and goes, I'm going to keep digging.
Yeah. Because then it just blows off the thing that you thought was the most valuable thing in its life. And now you just discovered there's something more valuable than the ball.
But also, just like with positive reinforcement, where the dog is doing the behavior, trying to get that reward, right? With negative punishment, the dog is in pursuit of that thing in order to do it's doing the behavior in pursuit of that thing. And if you remove it, now it has to choose a different behavior. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like it's only doing the behavior because of that thing you have that it's going to get. That's why you remove it, because it didn't do the right behavior, right? That's why it's the opposite of positive reinforcement, because it's the same thing. Positive reinforcement, it's the pursuit of that thing that causes the behavior. Negative punishment, the pursuit of that thing was what was pushing the behavior, but they did the wrong one, so you take it away. So the pursuit of that will change their behavior in the future, right? Correct. But it has to be something they want. We talked about that before. If it's not something they want, then it's nothing.
Yeah. And this makes for another interesting segue into another aspect of uses of punishment, is where, some people, and I've seen, people from Europe do this. There's a lot of people that are training this way here in the States now. But the reason why people are punishing away from a behavior, so say you're in the healing, dog looks away, rather than continue forward in healing and apply a positive punishment, they're discontinuing the motion or the activity, which is the healing, and they're stepping away from that location, providing consequence to the dog. I liked how you broke it down when we were talking about this. This was a while ago, but you broke it down saying that that's an effective method because a lot of people like it and find it's useful because you're not required to punish at the level or intensity that you would if the dog was in the driven behavior, because the dog is now taken out of that behavior and they're out of drive as well. So the punishment becomes more effective at a lower level. And you've removed them from that situation, which is also in essence a little bit of negative punishment because you're taking them away from something that they supposedly enjoy doing or find rewarding, right? Continuing to heal is rewarding. Continuing to bite is also rewarding, right?
Yeah.
And things like that. So like on the uses of punishment, you know, there are a lot of creative ways to do it. But it's just interesting to see everyone's stylistic approach to the utilization of the two quadrants for punishment, right?
Yeah. I mean, what it comes down to is, are you clear to your dog? Are you communicating clearly to your dog so they understand what is going on?
Yeah.
You know, whatever method you use, if you do it in behavior, if you do it out of behavior, is it clear to your dog, and does it lead to your dog keeping their motivation and learning to not go out of that behavior, right?
I'll add one more thing on top of that is, are you using the correct terminology and understanding why it's being done the way it's being done too? Like, can you define it with the correct terminology and correct definitions so that you can explain it to other people, right? Because that's important, right? You know, we're seeing a lot of people talk about the quadrant, and in our last episode where we talked about how people confuse reward with reinforcement, and they get those two quadrants mixed up, and they think negative reinforcement is just taking a reward away when it's really not. You know, it's important for people that involve themselves in dog training to understand and know what they're doing so they can explain why they're doing it.
Yeah. But and going back to puppies, right? Where I remember someone had asked, like, if your dog doesn't do something when it's a puppy, what do you do? And that was the thing, is like, when the whole thing with anything is, does your dog understand? Right? A puppy's not going to understand yet. So you just stop what you're doing and come back later, because it doesn't know what's going on. So there's no like using any kind of strong pressure to make something happen with a puppy, because it doesn't understand.
Right.
The whole thing with
Again,
that is, yep, is the dog understanding first, and that's the whole point, is of teaching what the dog what it means.
exactly. It's again, the puppy has not been prepared to understand the correction it will receive, and when it does get that correction, it doesn't know how to handle it or how to deal with it in a way that is constructive for the dog's situation, right? It's the same example as, you know, a correction in a language that the dog doesn't understand will always be perceived as aversive, right? That's a concept taught in the silver school. So if the dog only knows positive reinforcement, coming in with a positive punishment correction is not going to make sense to the dog, and it's going to send that dog into popo nay.
Yeah. Oh, that reminds me of, you know, when we have puppies in NePoPo, we start with teaching them tactile pressure, right? And the classic way is the sit, the down, the stand. Okay. But what I see a lot of is there's a misunderstanding of that. And what people are calling tactile pressure is actually just classically conditioning a signal to mean sit or stand or down. Because what they're doing is, like, they'll tap the butt. They tap the butt, tap the butt, tap the butt. And that's not teaching the dog to escape pressure, really, because that tapping is nothing. That's just creating a signal that means sit, because usually they'll use, some form of luring. No matter how little you move your hand, your dog is reading that, right? So they'll have food in the hand and tap the butt, and then the dog will sit. But usually it's because the hand is moving. So that is just becoming a classical conditioned signal. It's not tactile pressure. Same thing with a down. They tap the shoulders, the dog goes into a down, they feed, they tap underneath. That to me is not tactile pressure, teaching the dog how to live with pressure, right? Teaching the puppy with tactile pressure is keeping that pressure on there where they learn to overcome it and learn to be comfortable with it. Later, it becomes a tap, which is the same progression as the learning pyramid. Later, that pressure will become a tap, but at the beginning, it's pressure all the way to show the dog. Because how many dogs do you see when you put your hand on their shoulders, they turn around and try to get out from under it, right? That's the purpose of tactile pressure, is teaching the dog, hey, do this behavior and it'll turn off, right? And strengthen and making them stronger to that, so that any little touch doesn't freak them out. They've lived
Right.
through the pressure.
And when done correctly, if you use the tactile pressure the dog doesn't do, then you speak louder with that pressure than the dog does. And now it is both a cue and or negative reinforcement and a correction.
Yeah, when the dog understands.
Right. But
that's the point.
That's what's capable, and that's the goal, right? Is to be able to use it.
Correct.
It's to be able to use it to send the dog to go, and then to stop the dog at the same time.
Mm-hmm. There's another mistake I see that people make, using the healing sticks or whatever.
Right.
Well, what happens is you cannot teach the healing sticks from the front of the dog. When you tap their butt and they sit, tap their shoulders, then down. You can't do that from the front of the dog.
Right.
Because what happens is you have to lean over. So you leaning over becomes the cue to the dog to sit.
It's part of the cue. It's the picture.
Yeah. And it's not the pressure from the tap.
Spatial pressure.
It's not even avoiding the tap in that instance. It's your leaning over has become a cue to sit.
Right.
Right. That's why it should be
from the side.
From the side, right? Or behind.
Yep.
Either have your food in your hand, you have a treat and train, you have a bowl of food on the ground, you have a ball on the ground, you have something, a target. Because now their focus is on that. Now you actually are giving tactile commands.
Yeah.
Right? Without any body cues or body language. But it's just little things that I notice, the way they're done, which is I think that what people think is not what actually is happening.
Sure. Always in most cases. And I will say this, like, I've never really had a strong desire to breed any dog, just because I'm so familiar with what goes into it, and it's just a lot of work. However, it's one thing I probably will find a way to, be closely participating in the process of like a breeding eventually, so that I have the experience to like educate myself more about neonatal puppies, right? Like, or postnatal puppies, to understand more about their cognitive development, social development processes, because all of my puppy experience has been, with the exception of like a handful of times that I've met some of my friends' dogs that they've bred, and they've got super breeding programs, and they've been kind enough to let me meet the dogs before they were like 5, 6 weeks old. So I was there when I've seen some puppies before their eyes opened and some after their eyes opened at about 4 weeks. And that's something that I think would be very informative because there's a lot of purity in those dogs, right? You really see interesting behaviors that are just truly the nature of the dog. Um, and that's one thing when going back to our conversation on puppies is, there's not saying that everyone should go out and breed a dog so they can understand that, but like for me, that's one thing I feel like would be really educational for me, to be, to get more of that exposure. Um, just talking about puppies, that was a thought that cropped up into my mind.
There's a breeder here in town that they they have their group of owners and people they know. Whenever they have a litter, if you're part of their group, you can go pick up a puppy and take it with you shopping and then come back. Like from 5 week old, 6 week old, like they encourage that to expose the puppies to the environment. So you can go get a puppy for the day, bring it back later. Like I think that's the best thing to do for very young puppies to expose them to everyday life.
I can see
Right.
that. The one thing that like throws up a flag for me though is like making sure that the dog stays safe, right? The staying away from like contaminated areas. Like that would be a concern for me. And if I was like a prospective like puppy owner, I'd be paranoid about doing that myself.
But that's the thing. These people are already like they've owned dogs from that breeder. Breeder knows them, right? It's
Yeah,
not just some random person coming and getting the dogs,
right.
you know.
Yeah.
Which is something like I remember I asked my vet that I know because the whole thing with immunity, right? Wait until they get the third set of shots before you take them out. But I asked him, I was like, when is the dog actually protected when they get their vaccinations, right? And he said after the second set, they're pretty much good. You don't actually have to wait till the third set. But of course, you're still going to be careful because even dogs that have been vaccinated, they still catch stuff,
They still
right?
run down, they can get kennel cough or whatever it
Yep.
is.
So it's not,
Yeah.
yeah, they're protected, but it's more of you being careful. Because I
Yeah.
take out my puppies all the time, like from when I first get them. It doesn't matter how many shots they've had. Now, do I always put them down? No. Do I let everybody touch them? No.
Mm-hmm.
But they're still, even if I'm carrying them around, they're still getting exposed to everything, you know, the environment, the sounds, the smells. They don't have to run around on the ground to, be exposed to that. And then you can do that regardless of how many vaccines they've had.
Yeah.
We kind of went off the puppies a little. I mean, it was all had to do with puppies, but it wasn't
It all came
specifically
it all
puppies.
came back around. It all came back around. I was running out of ideas on puppies, and my food coma from a late lunch was like really just came on like a freight train, and then that conversation took off and it woke me up. So it's probably for the best. Otherwise, you'd see me nodding off here.
But talking about food with puppies, that's another thing I do is I mean, the the pool, the baby pool with the balls in it, throwing their food in there, having them find it, which is also teaching them to deal with pressure because the
Work
ball they
through
have to put their heads
pressure,
in the balls.
right?
I just add more and more balls depending on the dogs, like as I go to make it where they actually have to stick their head down in there, right? Climbing on stuff, tarps, having them walk on tarps that are all not just flat on the ground, but that you kind of scrunched up, um, and cans, bottles, just having them run through things to get their food, just everything. To the beginning is just strengthening, right, as much as possible.
Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, that's a pretty good hour and a half of conversation for sure. Uh but I gotta say, your insights on the luring onto the shopping carts, the pallets and everything at Home Depot, and your observations in your own dogs that were causing them to find that behavior rewarding. Like while we and the people who do that, they do it in order to desensitize the dogs to unstable surfaces, wobbly surfaces, things like that. It makes a lot of sense why that causes dogs to want to do that down the road, and maybe like causes some problems. But I think a lot of people would probably say, well, I'll take that problem over a dog that won't get up on it or something like that. So, who
Yeah,
knows?
but you don't, that's the thing with puppies. You don't have to do it 20 times.
Right.
You
And
do
to
it
each their
once.
own, you know?
Yeah.
So anyways,
Well,
all right. Well, you got anything else?
that is it.
All right, Mike. It's always great talking to you. Appreciate your insights. They're always informative. And again, we can't say this enough. We thank you for your likes, your shares, and your subscriptions to the channels. This is available on YouTube or on Apple Podcasts. Hoping to be able to get this onto the Spotify platform for the Android users, or if that's where you choose to listen to and download your streamable content. So just be patient with us, and we'll get there soon enough.
And also, I mean, we have a combined gold school for all those that have finished silver and that may be going to the new online silver. We do have our gold school in October in Texas.
Yes. Come see us in Texas. Come eat some good Tex-Mex with us. And
Yep.
train dogs, of course.
Yeah. Train dogs, train people.
And if you're not completed with your silver, jump online, be one of the first 100 people to get access to online silver, and then come see us for Gold School in Texas. All right, everybody. We're signing off for another one today. This was number 11. Thanks for joining us on the Full Quadrant Podcast.
Talk to you soon.